Hey everybody, welcome to Living Lamb's Vegan Kitchen, and today I'm going to show you how I make my burritos, which I am certain are completely inauthentic, but so, to anyone out there who knows the real deal, sorry. They're super easy to make and they're delicious, and after you make them a couple times, they're like clockwork. We often eat these when we want something fast to eat. The only thing is you have to kind of make the dough in advance, but then it can sit there and then when you're ready for it, it's ready. So I'm going to get right into it because it'll take a little bit of time. So first we're going to make the burrito shells, or wraps, or whatever you want to call them, since these are unofficial. And so basically what you just want to use is some amount of flour and some amount of liquid. You can use all whole wheat, in which case they'll be more toothsome, or you can use all white, in which case they're kind of strangely fluffy. So I use half and half. So I'm going to use an equal amount of whole wheat flour and an equal amount of white flour. And in this case, I'm using a third of a cup because my 12-inch pan will make a good third of a cup or half cup burrito. This is making two, so a third of a cup for each burrito. You can also use a quarter cup or whatever you want. Just use, the same amount for each burrito. And then for each burrito, I put a little knife helping of yeast in there. And it doesn't have to be any precise amount because I don't even think you technically have to have yeast, but it does help them be a little bit fluffy. And then whatever you used for flour, use half as much water. So I used a third a cup for each burrito shell, which make 2/3. So I'm going to use 1/3 of water. I hope that was clear. Half as much water as flour. And usually this works out pretty well, but humidity and all that business, you can sometimes get them a little dry or a little over moist, but it works out as a really good starting point. So we have in there a third a cup of whole wheat flour, a third a cup of white flour, a knife of yeast for each burrito, so 2 knives of yeast, and then half as much water as flour, so 1/3 a cup of flour. And what I'm doing is I'm just stirring it together with a butter knife. I'm just stirring it around and sort of cutting through it, because cutting through it exposes the dry surfaces and lets them get moist. And when I've done that for about as long as is practical, and it's, quite a bit moistened in there, I'm just going to dump it out on the counter and get the bits out. I'm using a plastic container because the scrapey sounds aren't as bad as on a metal container. And then I'm just going to squish everything together and kind of mash it down into the loose flour that's on the counter, just in an effort to pick up all the flour. And then I'm just going to start to knead it. And to knead it, all you do is you take your dough, give it a quarter turn, fold it in half, and push it down and forward. Quarter turn, fold it in half, push it down and forward. And you just keep doing that about 10 times. And then that's ready. Now, I can already tell that this one's a little bit sticky. So normally this would be done, but because this is sticky, and the way that you know it's sticky is you handle it and it's sticky. I'm just going to need just a little bit more flour into it. I just grabbed a pinch out of the bag. It's not science and doesn't need to be, so you don't have to sweat it. And I'm just going to knead in just a little bit more flour. And this is feeling much better. And even later, if it's sticky or if it's dry, you can correct it even later when we go to cook it. So don't sweat it. There's no real magic going on here. All right, so there again, I kneaded it about 10 times just to get the flour in. And now I'm going to make kind of a log out of it. I'm making 2 shells, so I'm just going to cut it in half into 2. And then these sides that were stuck together, I'm just going to close them up. And the way I close them up is I just push down and push together and then pinch the seam. Doesn't have to be perfect, just don't want huge exposed surfaces because they tend to dry out. And then I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them right here and just put them under some plastic. And so this is the morning. This is 11:30 in the morning. These are going to sit here till I need them at dinner at 5 o'clock. I could have done them at 7 o'clock. They can still sit on the counter all day. So you can make these as long in advance as you want to, and then they'll be ready for you for dinner. So they're just going to sit there, and I'll see you later this afternoon when I'm ready to make the beans. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye. And welcome back. So this is the next part of the burrito making, which is the beans part. And so all you need are some chopped onions, and you don't need this many, some mushrooms, and some greens, and then a can of beans. And so the first thing I do is I set my pan on medium, and I put in the mushrooms first, or excuse me, the onions first, just like, you know, a little bit, like a handful of onions down there. And then same thing, just like a handful of mushrooms. And I put them in the bottom so they can kind of like stick and get nice and caramelized. And then I put in greens, and I put about a cup of greens in. These are just frozen greens. And then I put the beans in there. I shake the pan just to level everything, and I cover it up, and I set the timer for 8 minutes. So these are seasoned beans, so these are already pre-seasoned beans, but you can use plain beans as well. If I use plain beans, what I do is I add like sort of a heaping quarter teaspoon of garlic powder and cumin to the beans as well. But since I'm using seasoned beans, I just put the can in there, don't add any other seasoning. So I put those on for 8 minutes, and then when the timer goes off, I'll catch back up with you. Thanks so much. See you soon. Bye-bye. Welcome back. So our timer is beeping, and our pot is boiling like crazy, like it's supposed to be. So I'm going to take the lid off it and give it a stir. And what we're trying to do is, so this is not nearly cooked enough. What we want to do is we want to get out as much liquid as we can. So you can see how it's not really sticking. You can see a little bit of stuff down there, but we want this to be sticking, and we want this liquid to be gone. Otherwise, we're going to have drippy burritos. So we're just going to let this, I'm just going to crank this up to high for a minute while this boils, and we'll just sidetrack here just for one moment, and we'll take a look at our burrito shells. You don't normally have to check this, like I'm just showing them to you. So you can see how they're kind of puffier, and they've sort of gotten bigger, but a little bit flatter, because, you know, the yeast is doing its thing, so that's what's going on there. And, yeah, so otherwise we're waiting for this. We need to boil this liquid off. So what I'm going to do, this is going to take about 2 minutes. So I'm just going to set my timer for 2 minutes, and I will see you then. Okie dokie, so welcome back. So my timer's gone off, 2 minutes, and now you can see. You see how it's really sticking down there? That's good news. Okay, so I'm giving, and you see there's very little liquid left. You can see some, but not much. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to set this burner off to the side, and I'm going to set the lid on it. And what will happen is, as it cools down with the lid on it, it'll steam the stuck stuff off the bottom. So ultimately, the bottom won't have any stuff burnt or stuck to it. It'll just be caramelized and delicious. And so there's that, and we will catch you later on when it's time to actually make the burritos. Thanks so much. Hey everybody, so welcome back. So now we're going to complete this multi-stage thing, and of course almost all this so far you can have done long ago. So you can do it at some convenient time so it's ready for dinner. So to finalize the beans, I'm just going to throw in a dash of mustard powder and a drizzle of vinegar. That was probably a teaspoon. And then I'm going to throw in some fresh small tomatoes. And of course, you know, you can put whatever you want in yours. I mean, maybe you want fresh onions, or maybe you want red peppers, or maybe you want jalapeno peppers. You know, maybe you want, I don't know, whatever you want. You can put it in there. And like that. But I'm just going to put these cherry tomatoes in. And then the beans will be ready. And I could have done this earlier. But this is usually what my husband does while I'm making the shells, but since he is holding the camera, I'm doing this part. Okay, so that's about 7 cherry tomatoes, and I'm just going to throw those with the vinegar and the mustard powder in there, and give it a stir, and you'll see how it was sticking. The bottom of the pan now comes right up clean, because it just got to sit there and cool down and steam itself. So the burrito filling is all ready. And once again, you know, you can fill these with anything. I mean, you can fill them with salad if you want to. So anything you want to go in your burritos is fine. Okay, now we're going to make the shells themselves. And so I'm using a scan pan. It's a non-stick pan. I don't think you have to use a non-stick pan, although I'm not completely sure. If you don't have a non-stick pan, if you have to use, you know, something in the bottom of the pan, I don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a little water in here. And what this does is this lets the pan have something to heat, so the pan just doesn't sit there and get hot and weird. And then the other thing that it does is it'll make steam in the pan that'll make cooking the burritos just a little bit even nicer. And I use my rolling pin, and because last time I made burritos the other day, some dough gets stuck on it, and see it's all kind of dry and crusty and falling off of it. What I do is I just take the edge of my wooden spoon, and I just do this along it. And you don't have to get it all off. You just want to get the dry stuff. And because I was sitting there talking to you with the beans here, I dropped beans on my floor. So give me one quick second to wipe these beans off my floor. Okay, back to business. All right, so this is on medium because you can't use a scan pan above medium, and it's got water in it, about a 1/4 cup. And now we have our dough. And you can see it's soft, and you can see it's sticky. When I said sticky, by the way, earlier, I mean like, I don't know how to describe it. It's sticky when you touch it. It's just not smooth. And that's what it is now too. If you put the rolling pin on it, it's going to stick to the rolling pin. So what we do is we just sprinkle down some flour, pat it on both sides, like this, and then just start to roll it out. And at first, you're just going to add a little flour to it before you roll it. And you just push away from you and pull toward you, and just dust it right back there in the flour. Smooth it right on the top, and that just makes a barrier between the rolling pin and the dough that keeps it from sticking. And I know burrito shells are not made this way. They're made this sort of pressy thing. But I already warned you that this is not authentic. And you can just call them wraps if you want to. Because they are authentic wraps. Because I don't think there is any official definition of a wrap other than it wraps. Okay. So these, I'm just going to roll them out. My pan can hold a decent size, so I'm just going to roll them till they're good and flat. If I wanted a bigger shell or a thicker shell, I would use a 1/2 cup of flour, and I do that sometimes. All right. Okay, so that's one. I'm going to grab my dough and kind of stick to the counter, so just kind of rub it off the counter. Give it a little flour. I usually start, well, I usually only ever make 2. But if I were only making 1, or if I were making more than 2, I wouldn't put anything in the pan until I had accomplished the time of rolling out 2. And the reason is you want your pan to be good and hot. And it makes your burritos nicer and fluffier if your pan is good and hot. So the pan right now is starting to boil, and you can see it boiling. And that's good. Because, like I say, putting the water in there gives the pan something to heat up. So it just doesn't sit there being, you know, just a big hot piece of metal over there. So we're getting close to being done with this one. As you see, I just sprinkle flour on it. It makes a barrier so it doesn't stick to my wooden spoon, or whatever that thing is called. Stick to my rolling pin. And then roll it out. And I think we're going to do 1, maybe 2 more on this one. I think that should be good. Okay, so now there's my pan. It's been heating up all this time. It should be good and hot, which is really, it'll still work if your pan is not super, super hot, but your first shell won't be as nice. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this water and throw it out in my sink. And I'm going to dry the pan because you want the pan to be absolutely dry. Otherwise, when you put that in there, you're going to get something that's more pasta-like instead of bread-like. So I'm just going to lift it up off the counter, flop it right in there, flatten it out a bit. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. And then put the lid back down. Putting the lid on carefully because you don't want water to drip in there for the same reason. Don't need it. I got this one. Okay, so we're waiting for that one to cook. And my husband's dealing with dishes because I forgot to get the dishes out, and he's doing that while he's holding the camera because he is such a multitasker. Okay, so now this one, it's sat here. This was about a minute. You can see it's gotten little bubbles on it. That's good enough. That's done. I just lightly touch it like this and move it so it doesn't stick. Pull it off my plate. I'll throw it on something there, and I'll tell you in a minute after I put this one in. Okay, so this one's in. Put the lid back on. Still have some water in there, so it'll still steam. You can see I didn't throw it on the flat counter because it's so hot. It'll condensate on the counter and just leave it wet. But putting it on something like that, let some air circulate around it. So I'm going to put in about half the topping. I'm not putting it all the way to the ends because it's going to goose that direction itself. Now this one's already done. So before we finish that up, once again, just kind of do that to it. Pull it out of the pan and just lay it somewhere where it can get a little air circulation. Okay. And then I just fold up the bottom, fold the whole thing over almost in half, and then I kind of squeeze the contents, you know, just so there's not a whole bunch of air space. I'm not like squeezing the contents, but just so there's, get rid of the air space and make it kind of dense. Move that one out of the way. Put my other one on there. Spread this stuff out. Once again, I don't go quite to the ends because, you know, when you squeeze it, when you eat it, it kind of moves it along a little. Fold the bottom. Fold it more or less in half. Top of there. Squeeze it a little bit, and then roll it the rest of the way. And then, there you have it. 2 lovely and delicious burritos. And again, you can fill the wraps with anything in the world. So I hope that was helpful, and I don't know if it seemed fiddly or not, but it's one of those things that after you do it about 3 times, it's nothing. It's nothing at all. And, you know, you can start it early in the morning and just a few minutes before dinner, put it all together. So anyway, I hope you like that, and thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.